Tonight, I am going to be continuing talking about Essential Practice by Thrangu Rinpoche, and tonight I am going to start the second treatise, which is called the Intermediate Treatise on the Stages of Meditation in the Middle Way School by Kamala Sheila. So chapter 1 of this treatise is on compassion. So Thrangu Rinpoche goes over the history again of Kamala Sheila coming to Tibet and teaching and so forth. I'm not going to go over that. I already have. But basically, Kamala Sheila came to try to unify the Buddhists in Tibet, and as opposed to having divisions and secular rivalry. So this treatise begins with him saying that he's written this treatise so that for them that wish to practice the great vehicle, the Mahayana vehicle. And if you're going to attain the rank of Buddha, there are causes, and you have to engage in the causes in order to achieve the rank of Buddha. If you don't depend on the causes, it's not going to happen, basically what he says here. So we need to know what these causes are. And then we have to accomplish these causes if we are going to become Buddhas. He says here, quote, "The causes must be accomplished fully and flawlessly." So what is it that a practitioner needs? A practitioner needs a compassionate mind, the mind of awakening, and a skill in method. Sometimes that's translated skillful means. They're talking about the same thing. So to begin with, bodhisattvas start with training in compassion. Without compassion, you cannot achieve your own liberation. Compassion is, you might say, the basis that we need to work on. And that's, of course, the chapter title. So now he gives instructions for cultivating compassion. Generally, everyone has some level of compassion, but it is flawed compassion. And what the flaw is, that we draw lines and say, I can have compassion for this being, but I can't have compassion for that being. And that is a flaw. This is partial compassion. So he used the example of catching a fish to give it to a dog that is hungry. Well, it's very good for the dog, but it's kind of hard on the fish. So we always have to be careful that our compassionate actions do not harm others. So we have to widen who we are considering part of, you might say, the beings that we feel compassion for. Again, he says, it's easy to feel compassion for people of your country, but then kill people from another country to protect the people of your country. Of course, what came to my mind was immigration for some reason or another. Compassion means that even the people that you have difficulty rousing compassion for, you need to include them in your compassion, or at least to have the aspiration. This is very important, at least to have the aspiration to include beings in these aspirations to have compassion. It's one thing to, well, I can't help and I don't care, or I can't help, but I wish that I could. I wish that I did have the compassionate attitude so I could help them, relieve them from their suffering. So when there is partial compassion, then trouble can arise, and we want to avoid that. So the uncommon compassion that we are, you might say, encouraged to engage in has two aspects. And that is, it has no measure. And that the compassion, we have this aspiration to extend it to all sentient beings. The other aspect is, since compassion is the wish to free sentient beings from suffering, it is not always possible to do that immediately. And so you might say the small print is to work on freeing them from the causes of suffering. So I have here, I don't know if this is my own example or if it was in the book, but I've got diabetes, and so I have to avoid eating things. I think this was in the book. You have to avoid eating things that make you feel sick, sugar, other sweet things, and so forth. They cause suffering. So the book makes this equivalence that sweet things, suffering from illness because of the sweet things. So if you've got diabetes, you have to avoid eating sweet things, or at least cut them down, or take your medication in this case. So that is the point that he is making about removing the causes, helping beings, removing the causes that are causing their suffering. To continue here, we need to generate a compassion that is immeasurable and intelligent, which covers these 2 points. So we start with equanimity. And he says to start with equanimity, we contemplate that all beings are the same. Basically, they are the same. At least we can look at human beings as they all share similar bodies to ours, and that they suffer too. And we can start to, you might say, weaken our resistance to having compassion for all beings. And the example in the book is start with 100 humans and think about them, and go along the lines of thought that they don't want suffering, they want happiness, and we all are very, very similar. And how do you draw the line and say, well, I'm going to include 90 in, but these 10 over here don't belong in my circle of compassion? So he says, what's the point of being selective? And keep contemplating this, and gradually you will feel more compassion for beings. And as you keep doing this, your compassion will increase and grow, and eventually you will be able to feel compassion even for your enemies. Again, it might be people that you have a small amount of aversion for to begin with, and then as you increase, your circle of compassion, you can include people that you have more anger towards. And this is important to not be selective about who you feel compassion for. Talks about everybody has the four sufferings: birth, old age, sickness, and death. Everybody has the experience of not getting what you want, and then getting what you don't want. And the third type of suffering in this group is all pervasive suffering. I like to use the term angst, that deep inside we know impermanence. We buy all kinds of insurance policies, and even in spite of all of that, there still is this uncertainty, and there is always this feeling of anxiety, fear, what could happen. I guess feeling vulnerable might be a good way to put that. The point is to cultivate compassion for everybody, to want to free all human beings from suffering. And I will add this, that a lot of times powerful people that are in the news today, they're behaving the way they are because they're suffering. They're not behaving the way they are because they're having a great time. So then Thrangu Rinpoche, or Kamala Shila, goes through the three realms. The desire realm is the six realms that we're familiar with: the hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, jealous gods, and gods. And think about the suffering that each of those realms experience. And then there is the form realm, which is a God realm, and the formless realm, which is the highest God realm. And all of these have their own form of suffering. Thrangu Rinpoche says, quote, "Many of whom experience unimaginable torment." And here, of course, he's referring to the lower realms: animals, hell beings, and hungry ghosts. And so if we think about their suffering and think about how we would like to help them at least remove the causes of their suffering and then remove their suffering, this contemplation and our aspirations will help us progress on the path. So then he says, cultivate compassions for the gods. Well, the gods enjoy a lot of pleasure and wealth and so forth, that ultimately they have to die. They leave it all behind, and they realize in advance that they are going to die, and that causes tremendous suffering. And then he talks about animals that suffer from predation, disease, humans that suffer from poverty, torture, and so forth. And that these types of suffering are very, very prevalent today in the world. And if you look at the gods, their situation is not permanent, it'll change. And therefore, he quotes this about the God realm. The Buddha regarded comfort and wealth as the suffering of change. We can look, and this is a fault, we can look at human beings that are having a lot of comfort, privilege, wealth, and so power and so forth, and think that they don't need compassion. and maybe they are the ones that are causing a lot of problems. And he says they do need compassion because in a few years, 10, 20, 30, or so forth, that their circumstances will change, their comfort and wealth will disappear, and then they will have tremendous suffering. So he says, quote, whether they are presently faring well or badly, all sentient beings deserve our compassion. Again, emphasizing this, we have to grow our compassion until it extends to all sentient beings. And this is the root of all other good qualities that we want to develop. So now he talks about love, and love must be immeasurable as compassion is, and love must be intelligent. People that need love need to have the causes of happiness. Beings that we want to be happy, they need the causes of happiness. And he goes to this example of a flower again, and that you can't grow a flower without the proper causes. You have to have soil, proper temperature, fertilizer, and so forth. So beings need the causes of happiness if they are going to be happy. And compassion is separating others from the causes of suffering, as I said, which are the 5 mental afflictions and bad actions, habitual patterns that are negative. And love means joining others to the causes of happiness. Love, compassion, accumulation of virtue, and so forth. Living an ethical life. Living in a way that separates us from the causes of suffering, and it comes to include doing things that are the causes of happiness. And so in the future, beings that behave that way will be free of suffering and they will be happy. He lists this now, that the compassion taught by the Buddha is unusual because first we cultivate equanimity or immeasurable equanimity. We're going through the 4 immeasurables here, and then immeasurable compassion, and then immeasurable love. And then from these develops immeasurable joy. And I've heard this a number of times about that really these 4 immeasurables, traditionally they list equanimity last, but you need to practice equanimity first. So that's an important point. So this is an uncommon way of cultivating compassion through equanimity, and then immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love, and then immeasurable joy. So to go on here, this is an important point, and that is because compassion involves removing the causes of suffering, and love also means increasing the causes of happiness. quote, "There's always something I can do to help others." It's important to think about this, and it's also important to realize that you want to have your actions be skillful so that you do get the results that you were hoping for rather than causing more pain. So that completes the first chapter of this second treatise. I'm going to go down now to the second chapter. And this second chapter is the mind of awakening and the causes of calm abiding. He mentions that a person who has this mind of awakening is called a warrior of the mind of awakening. And this means a courageous person, someone who does not fear. And he uses the word anything after fear. Does not fear helping sentient beings. So if we're practicing the way of a bodhisattva, we have to avoid becoming discouraged when facing the needs of so many sentient beings. Basically, there's a limitless number of sentient beings. So we have to practice courageously. We have to avoid getting discouraged. Even though it might seem endless, if we have this attitude, this warrior's mind of awakening, we can persevere. So there are two varieties of the mind of awakening that he mentions here in the treatise: conventional mind of awakening and ultimate mind of awakening. So the conventional mind of awakening has pure and vast motivation, and purity here is the purity of compassion, and the compassion has two aspects. We focus on the welfare of sentient beings rather than our own, and compassion possesses supreme knowledge. He uses the word stupid. It's not stupid, and it enables us to help others. Now, the second is, so we focus on the welfare of sentient beings rather than on our own welfare, but the compassion of supreme knowledge is, it's not stupid. I've got my notes confused. It's not stupid. It enables us to protect others and establish them in happiness. And it's not provisional. It's final. So that is this supreme versus the conventional mind of awakening. And this motivation will want us to do things that are most beneficial for others. And he says it moves us internally, but it has a tremendous external power in terms of how it affects other people, how the Buddha and his teachings, or the teachings of the Buddha, spread to many parts of the world, and many beings have achieved the fruition of the path. So he talks a little bit about the Buddha's path, about how he began as an ordinary person and that he resolved to attain supreme awakening. He developed, his teachings developed, and the whole Buddhist tradition was born and has developed. So if he hadn't resolved to attain supreme awakening, we wouldn't be here talking about Buddhism. So the idea is that you begin small and grow from there. And he mentioned some of the stories, at least one story of the Buddha's previous life. And here, the Buddha was born a Brahmin, but was poor. This is a previous life of the Buddha, and there was a Buddha at that time. And he offered the Buddha very little, but it was like all he had. But as a result of that and his motivation, he was able to accumulate tremendous merit as a result of that. And that the mind of awakening took root in his mind. Thrangu Rinpoche continues that we have to train our mind in ethics so that we know the qualities of the mind of awakening. And then we must generate the intention to achieve supreme awakening. And that means committing ourselves to leading all sentient beings. This, of course, is building on the equanimity that was talked about in the previous chapter. And he says that to make our intentions firm, we take a vow. And I would say he must be talking about the Bodhisattva vow at this point. But there are other vows that can be taken too. But the idea is to really make your intentions firm, that there's no going back. And with this intention, with this firm intention, you will slowly improve, grow, travel the path. Then that leads to what is called the ultimate mind of awakening. And this is, in his words, supreme knowledge and wisdom. And I would say that the Sanskrit words for this are prajna and jhana, or sharab and yeshe. Supreme knowledge is something that you accumulate, and wisdom is something that you reveal. Wisdom sometimes is called primordial wisdom, always existing, never not existing. It's just a matter of clearing away the obstacles for experiencing it. And so this brings up the topic of calm abiding and insight meditation. And they are the cause of this supreme, this ultimate mind of awakening. Next, he talks about the sutra unraveling the thought. This is a teaching the Buddha gave. That's why it's called a sutra. And he said calm abiding and insight meditation are very, very important. And all levels of attainment depend on them. From the hearers, it's the word that was used in the book. Listeners and hearers are frequently used to describe the hearers, from the listeners and hearers to the Buddha. And that calm abiding and insight are very important, that calm abiding suppresses afflictions, and that the insight, The supreme knowledge gained by insight will destroy the afflictions from the root. So we start by practicing calm abiding. And we have to have a stable mind before we can practice insight. So he talks about it's possible to become proud of our calm abiding. And that, of course, is a fault. It won't free us from suffering. So we have to make sure that we do not get proud of our ability to meditate or get attached to it. So then once we have a stable, abiding mind that is calm, we cultivate insight. And if we don't have calm abiding, we cannot have stable insight. And we really can't accomplish much with this unstable mind. He uses the example of a butter lamp in the wind. The flame of a butter lamp in the wind can easily be blown out. And even if it isn't blown out, it will flicker and give a very unsteady light. So the causes of calm abiding are faith. And here he talks about faith as, quote, knowledgeable belief together with strength of heart. And knowledgeable belief is, I would say, the opposite of blind faith. That your belief is based on your experience and what you have learned and so forth. It's not blind faith. Blind faith actually is a barrier to traveling the path. So knowledgeable belief is a conviction that we will attain qualities by cultivating calm abiding, that we are doing the right thing to travel the path. And then strength of heart is confidence that we will achieve calm abiding. That's an important point. You don't want to get into the fault of self-deprecation. Oh, I could never do that, so why should I try? Or I could never do that, but I'll try a little bit. And of course, that doesn't get you anywhere. So we have to have the faith, confidence, and then the calm abiding will arise. So then Kamalashila mentions 5 preliminary conditions that we have to have in order to accomplish calm abiding. So first of all, we have to abide in a place that accords with meditation. And here he has a few points about this first one. We go to a place where others appreciate the value of calm abiding and insight meditation. And a place where there is a knowledgeable person who can teach meditation. And a place that is free from people that would harm practitioners. Those are what he mentions as being a place that accords with meditation. I had a discussion. I do Zoom on Tuesday in the afternoon with inmates. And last week I had this discussion with an inmate. He's in what is called the barracks. New inmates go to the barracks. They don't have rooms. They're in bunk beds and they're out in the open. I've been there. I know what it's like. I've been there as a visitor, needless to say. But if you try to meditate, another inmate will come over there and purposely disturb you, keep you from meditating. That's the kind of situation you want to avoid. So that might be an extreme example, but free from those who would harm practitioners. Now, the second point is having few desires that make meditation the main activity. Having a lot of activities will distract and keep you from meditating. And I think we all understand that. I have that problem myself. There's just so much going on that it's difficult sometimes to keep focused on meditation. The third is to feel content with practicing meditation well. That I'm stressing well, doing it well. Because when we do it well, it will enable us to achieve this stable meditation. And then he adds this, having few desires and feeling content will motivate us to practice correctly. The fourth is a bit repetitive, but it is abandoning other activities to focus on meditation and exclude other things that will distract you. So if your mind is distracted, if your energy is scattered, then the meditation will not be stable and clear. And the fifth point is purity in ethics. To some people, ethics might seem, in his words, narrow and cramped. Actually, practicing ethics leaves your mind peaceful and relaxed. You don't have to be wondering how you are going to get even with somebody. You're not concerned about how you are going to impress somebody else or how you're going to afford to buy the next thing that you have to buy. Or you're not going to be so concerned about having this inner dialogue with yourself, telling you how you lack this, you lack that, you screw up, and, the inner critic. So anyway, ethics is Shila in Sanskrit, and he talks about having a meaning of cooling, where in India, a cool breeze is very highly appreciated because it's a tropical country. So this coolness is a very good, pleasant feeling. So ethics brings peace, brings ease, and it has this cooling effect on the practitioner. And now he talks about different ethics. He talks about pratimoksha, which is individual liberation vows, and goes into talking about abandoning stealing. That, well, if you abandon stealing, then you don't think too much about it. You won't start thinking that stealing will bring happiness. You will think that maybe if I stole something, the person that I stole from will suffer. So when you start thinking about stealing and actually stealing, then you have fear, fear of being found out, fear of retribution, and so forth. So now he talks about different sets of ethics, one for ordained and the other for householders. And what I just went into would be not good for either lay people or the monks and nuns, but there are 5 precepts: celibacy, lying, stealing, taking life, recreational drugs, and or alcohol. And celibacy, I have understood Rinpoche to say this, that if you would take the vow of celibacy, it means that you can be with your present partner, but if you split up or your present partner dies, then you are celibate. I know other teachers say if you take the vow of celibacy, you are celibate. But I've heard others tell me that that is how Rinpoche would interpret this vow of celibacy. But these are the 5 precepts, and a layperson can take one and they choose, or they can take any combination of them up to all 5. But the idea is that this really helps settle the mind down, cools the mind. It just, if you follow it, it makes life a lot simpler. And then there is a variation. You can take it for your lifetime, or you can take it for a specific period of time. And here in the book, it's mentioned 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, 24 hours, or 12 hours. When we do Nyungne here, we take these vows for 24 hours. And then the next morning, renew them if we're going to continue with the Nyungne. But no matter how long the vows are that you take, there is benefit to taking them, even if it's for 12 hours. The point being that we need to train. We need to gradually increase our ethical conduct, and as a result, we will attain this coolness that is talked about, that meditation or meditative stabilization will follow gradually. And then with that follows the basis of knowledge. So ethics comes first and is the basis for the other 2.